Hello, hello, hello. We're a little early. Hopefully, it's not too bad for everybody. Still expecting a couple people to show up. So I'll give them a couple minutes to log in. Thanks. Just in case anybody else has sent me slides, please let me know. I haven't seen any except from Richard.
Sean's microphone is clearly picking up your typing.
Yeah. I'm whacking away on something related to MLS too, so I figured you could all feel the pain. All right, cool. Nick's here. All right, we'll give everybody about 2 more minutes and then we'll kind of jump into it. I know that we were not going to get Conrad today, unfortunately, but it looks like many of the people that said yes to this meeting are here, so that's good. Rowan?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Britta already mentioned the thing that I was going to say.
I missed it.
There's a big lag on.
Yeah.
It took me like 5 times to get into the.
Yesterday Teams was the bane of my existence. Today it's going to be Data Tracker. Unfortunately, it's more often than not Data Tracker. All right. But we're here. All right. Give it another minute. Okay, it's 5 after. I think we're going to jump into this. Welcome to our interim meeting. This is an official meeting because we actually got the request in on time. Thank you for meeting possibly during some of your breaks for the holidays. This is an official meeting of the IETF, so please note well. There's a lot of policies and procedures here. Basically, if you're going to participate, you're going to follow our processes. There's a bunch of standards process, working group procedures, there's some anti-harassment stuff, code of conduct, copyright, patents, and participation. A lot of that basically comes down to it. If you know something, say something. Got any questions, you can ask Nick or I, or any of the other participants. They're probably pretty good and filled with knowledge. The next thing is to know it really well. This is basically about trying to, act with some empathy, and keep it professional. I mean, at the end of the day, you don't have to like somebody's idea, but it would be better if you could actually like them. Go from there. And, our agenda is pretty straightforward. It's the administrivia note, the note really well that we just did. We do need a scribe to volunteer. Is anyone willing to take some notes for us? You can do it in the notepad. Thanks, Brendan. I really appreciate it. And then this is just basically kind of our agenda really was extension. So if anybody had any of the extension documents that we were talking about, we've actually done a really good job. We accepted the combiners document that Britta and others were working on. So we've got that in the working group now as an official working group item. And I know Richard has some ideas that he sent to the list, and I uploaded those slides.
Yep, that's what I was going to say.
Okay, cool. So we're good. There's like 10 other documents. I know that Conrad was working on a couple, and I know that Brendan had one as well. So we're going to have enough time here to be able to probably go through Richard's and then anything else that pops up. And so without further ado, you just want to jump into Richard, into your proposals, and then we can take others from there.
Yeah, I think Britta's maybe was the only one that was more mature than that. If she had anything she wanted to bring up.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't get anything, so I wasn't sure. Britta?
Sure, I can just bring it real quickly. It's out, as Sean said, so please feel free to weigh in. I think a couple of notes we had from the last IETF was more expansion on the security consideration section, and we're currently adding that, and also a nice little table about it. But if you're interested in reading or commenting on anything else, please do so, and we'll be rolling out an updated version.
Yeah, and hey, before we get too far into this, Nick, I don't know, is there anything that you wanted to add?
No, I think we're ready to go.
All right, cool. I will stop sharing this deck and get to the Richard, I think maybe you.
Sean, you disappeared, but I requested slides.
I see that.
Sure.
I'm trying to figure out how so maybe if I stop sharing slides, and maybe you try now, and if I couldn't find a button to hit yes.
I sent you a request.
I can see the X, but I can't see where's the I say Y. Send it again. It's got to be in here somewhere. I see it. It comes across, and then all I see is an X. That's really annoying. All right, I'm stumped. Why won't it let me do that?
I can try and do a screen share. If that would be more expeditious.
I think I'm going to have the same problem. It's weird because I can see it. It comes across, and all I can see is an X to hit no. All right, well, let's just do this. You just tell me next slides, and we'll go from there.
Oh, can you put them up?
Yeah, I got them there. They can come up. I don't know. Can you click the buttons to go to the next thing, or must I do it?
I do not see any buttons. On
okay, cool.
UI,
you say go ahead, and I will click the button.
All right, so yeah, I'll start my narrative here, and I'll let you know, Sean. So this is a little bit of a proposal for rethinking how we are, this app sync proposal we had talked about, as well as some bits out of the extensions document. So next slide, please, Sean. Abusing maybe a little bit aggressive here, but we've been a little loose in our use of this word extension. And this became a pain point as I was chatting with Rowan about some app sync stuff. And as we were talking about GCEDIF at the last IETF meeting, that a lot of application stuff was kind of infecting MLS and bringing complexity into MLS that didn't really need to be there. because this was complexity that belonged to the application. It wasn't touching the internals of MLS at all. And so like kind of the underlying idea here is to focus up the terminology. When we talk about extensions, talk about things that change the behavior of MLS, and thus, delegate more clearly stuff up to the application and make a more rich application API. At the same time, keeping that as kind of a demarc between the application and its complexity and anything that's touching the internals of MLS. So that's kind of the underlying philosophy here. Got a bunch of more interesting concrete mechanisms down below. Next slide, please. Keep going. Next. Yeah, so one kind of corollary of this tightening up of the definition of extensions is that a bunch of the stuff that's in safe extensions, that section of the MLS extensions document, that starts to look at like application stuff, because it's talking about how you use an MLS group, how you use that data that's in an MLS group, things like signature keys, HPKE keys, import, export, how you use that from, an application. So it's like if you got an MLS library that has that surface to it that exposes that information, how do you safely use that from the outside? Nothing to do with the insides of that MLS library. It's all kind of the interface out to the application there. So that has some implications for how we design this. For example, we shouldn't be using extension IDs as distinguishers because we're not extending the MLS protocol. We're using it from outside. So we'll have some separate IDs and things like that down the way. So basically, the part of the proposal here is to stop talking about safe extensions and talk about a safe application API instead. Next slide, please. Sean, next slide, please. Thank you. So yeah, the other underlying kind of design here, now moving from philosophy to design, is that like an MLS session, an MLS group exposes a bunch of different security stuff, functions that you might want to leverage as an application. In the base protocol, we were, of course, focused on the usual things that an application wants from a secure communications protocol. Authentication of the other parties involved, sending authenticated and confidential data, sending authenticated but not confidential data. And so we have okay mechanisms for that right now that are pretty usable. We might want to do some tweaks on that, and as well discuss that a little down the road, but like they're basically usable functions. And the thing is, but there are also some more advanced things that applications might also want to use that aren't quite as cleanly exposed and need some, Let me know if anyone else is having audio issues or if it's just a Raphael problem, and I can try and refactor a different audio device, whatever. But basically, we've got these other properties. The bottom four are things that safe extensions covers, right? Which is domain separating and reducing collision risks, keeping them separate from MLS, keeping them separate from other application contexts. And then the things that are more like what AppSync has been talking about, these kind of middle two, where we're talking about letting the application use an MLS context to confirm that the group agrees on application data, or to confirm that the group agrees on application data at a given time at a given commit. So those kind of agreement things. And I guess there's another thing in here, which is kind of sticking data onto MLS messages as a way to piggyback on MLS's confidentiality stuff. So the idea of this app API document is basically to expose safer APIs, kind of fill in these gaps that are listed in orange. Next slide, please, Sean. So yeah, we've got basically the structure of this document is filling in those gaps. So for the bottom four, which are well covered by the safe extension stuff, we've just copied and pasted that in and adapted it a little bit. And then for those upper two, we've kind of taken some of the stuff from AppSync and generalized it a little bit to make it more generally useful. So we've got an application data extension, an application data proposal, and an application update proposal. These names are very generic and kind of horrible in that way. So please keep your better name generator warmed up in the background and let me know if you've got good ideas. So the rest of this is kind of going into a little more detail on those mechanisms. Next slide, please. Oh yeah, another kind of concept we've got here. So the safe extensions document. One of the things that is a kind of guiding design principle for safe extensions is this idea that you have multiple loosely coordinated bits of code that are all accessing the same MLS group. In that context, it was talked about as different extensions. We've kind of renamed that to components or application components in this document because, again, from the MLS library's point of view, from the MLS context point of view, everything to the northbound from there is application. And how you use the MLS context is up to the application. But this is accommodating the idea that an application might have multiple different parts. And if you kind of look at a Mimi as an example, I think folks have in mind things like managing the participant list or managing room title, managing authorization state. It might be different components that would manage state separately. So the idea is that we have these, assume the existence of these components. If you don't need the diversion, you just one. Just use one. We assume that these components have component IDs, which are just numbers. I think they're 2 octets or something that they're assigned somehow within an application. So in the safe extensions context, when it was safe extensions, they were using extension types, which are 2 octet values assigned by an IANA registry. What's in the document now is less codified than that. It just kind of says you need to be unique within an application and stick with that. We might iterate on how exactly we assign these IDs. Maybe we have a registry for some ones that will need to be interoperable. But once we've got these IDs, of course, we can use them for things like domain separation, like safe extensions always did, or separating, tagging data as belonging to specific components of an application. I'll just mention here, I put a green tick mark next to the AAD and plain text fields on previous slides, indicating those are pretty good. This is an area where we might want to, add a layer on those so that we could have different components adding to AAD or adding components to the plain text and have that same sort of separation there. But that's fairly straightforward to do. Next slide, please, Sean. So yeah, the safe extensions bit, it's basically just copy paste. Does the same stuff. We just use the component IDs instead of the extension types. Next slide, please. Sean, next slide, please. Thank you. All right, so here we get into the new stuff. So one thing that actually kind of didn't exist in either AppSync or safe extension, kind of exists in the safe extensions stuff, is this idea of application defined proposals. And there was a little bit of this in there's current some stuff in the safe extension section in the extensions doc right now tries to do a lot more. The stuff in the extensions doc now tries to do a lot more because it's kind of in this gray zone of extensions where maybe it's just application, maybe it's trying to change the MLS state, and so it's got stuff that requires a path, doesn't require a path, and it's a lot more complex. This is focused purely on applications, which is nice because you're guaranteed that whatever's in this extension doesn't do anything to the MLS group. It doesn't touch the group context, doesn't touch the tree. And so in particular, you never have to do an update path on account of this proposal. And so you can safely manage, use this for managing application stuff or sending stuff that the application needs without ever having to send an update path again on account of this proposal. Why do we care about putting this in proposal? Well, Mimi likes proposals because you can sign them and not encrypt them, and so you can expose stuff to intermediaries that way. But the other thing it gets you is that these things go in the transcript. So you know that everyone who got the commit got the same set of application data. So commits already kind of act as a synchronization point in applications because in MLS using applications because you got to synchronize the commits to make MLS work at all. And so this lets you kind of tag other state changes within the app to the same sort of synchronization points. So this kind of basically removes the need for creating any new proposals at the application layer. If you're not touching the internals MLS, you can just use this thing, and your proposals go in the transcript. You get the synchronization. It all just sort of works. Next slide, please. So the other thing that is handy about the extensions fields, I think probably why people got in the habit of talking about extensions, application stuff that used extensions fields as extensions, is that we put all these fields in a bunch of messages that are called extensions, and you can kind of shove arbitrary data there, which is attractive to applications for some reasons. To kind of clean up that application demarc, what we define in this doc is one extension that goes in the extensions field that can hold the application data. So whatever your information is that you want to use to you want to carry in a group context, or in a group info message for new joiners, or in your leaf node. That is just application data and doesn't affect the operation of MLS. The MLS stack doesn't need to know about it. You can just use this extension. We define one extension. It can go in any of these places. For the most part, group info, leaf node, key package, those are either group info and key package are kind of ephemeral, right? They're just used once and then you throw them away. Leaf nodes has more durability. Putting an extension in leaf node has more durability, but we already have a way to change that efficiently with the update proposal or with sending commits in your leaf. So leaf node extensions already have an update mechanism. So the group context is really kind of the odd situation out here, because the only way we have to change a group context extension is the group context extensions proposal, which requires you to send the whole thing. All of the extensions for the whole group get retransmitted. Now, we've talked about IETF, but I'm going to try and peel off the application bit of that here with what we're calling application data update. In the next slide, please. Yeah, Raphael.
Yeah, if I can just interject quickly regarding the last slide, that's yet another use of the word extension here, which really refers to extension fields in the leaf node, for example, and the group info. It's not an extension in the sense that it modifies the protocol. And it's also not an extension as we used previously, which is now being renamed to app component, right? Just want to make that clear.
Yeah, correct. This is an extension, like in the sense of a data structure that you put in an extensions field. And so, but the idea is to use that one sin, that one abusive terminology, to free up, to create the demarc by which application stuff can use these extension fields without having to pretend that it's modifying MLS and do all the compatibility negotiations. Yeah, Rob?
I'm going to say that I think this is an MLS extension in that the group context needs the contents of this particular extension field needs to get updated when certain proposals are sent. Which is in the next slide. So in that way, this is actually an MLS extension. It's collapsing a bunch of things that would have been extensions that are application specific to be one that is providing the API to the applications.
Yeah, fair point.
Yeah, this is not consistent with the definition you gave earlier. I mean, we don't need to discuss this now, but I think we're still not entirely aligned on the terminology, but it sounds like we are aligned on what we want to achieve here.
Yeah, I concur on the terminology. I think just in terms of discussion, it'd be useful to at least separate out the terminology in terms of maybe calling this an extending field, and maybe the extending field is an extension, but to be consistent, extension is something that modifies the protocol, and then we can better track what's happening.
Yep. Yeah, to Rowan's point, we do have a new proposal type here that's focused on updating just this extension field. I'll use extension field as a as a hopefully clearer thing. So Sean, can you flip the next slide, please? So, and part of the thing about having application data on the group context is that group context extensions is an awkward way to update it, especially if you have large data. So the way we got this laid out right now assumes that the application state you're going to have in the application data group context extension field is large. And so you want to send patches to it. So you imagine like a participant list with 1,000 participants. You don't want to resend that 1,000-person list whenever you add one person or remove one person. You would like to just send that one entry you had to remove. So the principle here is that you send these updates that are in a form, much like the application data is in a format opaque to MLS, the update, the patch, is in a format that's opaque to MLS. And the operational model here assumes that there's some API for the MLS stack to call out to the application and say, dear application, here's the bucket of application app data update proposals that I've gotten that I'm going to apply in this commit. Please tell me what the new application data is and how I should change the application data extension field in the group context. So there's a little bit of an assumption of I'll call it an API design or an interaction design structure between the MLS stack and the application there. I think that's my main worry about this is what that, how simply we can make that interface. But I think kind of regardless of how we structure these proposals, there's a need for some sort of callback there, so that the application can at very least say, this is a valid set of application relevant proposals. It's just a question of how we manage it. So in any case, the idea of this proposal is to send a diff on a chunk of application state. So either you update, in which case you create one if it's not there, and then you put whatever content there the application tells you, or you remove it. Now on the next slide, Sean, there's the kind of major design question that I think Rowan and I have relatively strong disagreement about. His version's in the document right now because I was being kind. But I want to raise the question, like there's a design question here as to whether the app data update should be a diff and provide a diff that the application has to apply and tell the MLS stack the new value, or whether it should just be a replacement, in which case you wouldn't really have to ask the application for the new value. The MLS stack could just apply the proposal and replace put the new value in place, and all the application will be in charge of doing is checking that everything makes sense. Not clear that either one of these is a clear winner. The diff version has a slightly more complicated version of this callback API. The logic is a little bit more complicated, but you're going to need this callback anyway. And in the replace case, you need some way to initialize joiners, which you could in principle do by shoving things into the welcome message, but the application would need to do that. It wouldn't just happen as a result of the literal state being in the group context. Rowan?
Yeah, so I want to focus on, so these bottom 2 points here. So you still need a callback to, for the application to say this combination of application state update, data updates are valid, because you could have more than one. So for example, if you have 2 people who try to leave a group, and they both need to remove themselves from a participant list, you want to be able to commit both of those pending proposals at the same time, and you want that to be valid. But you also don't want to have two people who are both removing Bob from the list. One of those is invalid. They need to become a single operation. So I don't think that there's a lot of gain to not, to make to not allow diffs. And this can be on a per component basis. So I'm going to send in the group here in a second, as soon as I get the cookie dough off my fingers, the very short draft that I wrote that just has 4 different application components proposed for Mimi: a participant list, room role definitions, room metadata, and pre-authorization lists. And so this, of these 4, only one of them has a diff. The other 3, the components, the diff operation or the update operation is just a wholesale replacement of the previous value. Finally, I'm going to say that you could have some other way to get information for joiners of a list, joiners of a group. But doing that for an application like Mimi that's federated, it's going to introduce a whole host of additional security problems. I don't see a compelling reason to prevent applications from doing this. I see a compelling reason why the API should allow for choice, so that if your application wants to keep the state in MLS as small as possible, then your components would make, for example, a hash, and that's how they would represent things inside, or they would only do wholesale updates. But that is something that should be up to the application and not a decision that we should force on them here.
I would just note on that latter point that an application could do, by using the group info application data field, get the same dynamics as if the value were in the group and context extensions. It would just have to call the API that says, add this to the group info in this welcome. That would be an API, as opposed to just happening automatically. So, in that scheme, the welcome in the group context extensions would have the confirmation in the group info extensions. So I think it's not as huge a difference. Like if you wanted to just have it work basically the same way as in this, like it could be done. But I agree, the application would have to do a thing. In any case, I don't think we need to have a big debate here. I just want to kind of flag this as like the major thing that Rowan and I couldn't agree on as we were drafting this, and where input from other folks would be super helpful as tiebreaker. All right, so that's all the new functionality. I've just got a couple kind of concluding notes. Next slide, please, Sean. Sean, are you awake? Thanks. So one of the corollaries here is that we might be able to simplify down this GCE diff proposal that we talked about at the last IETF meeting. So the idea of that was that we were going to put all this complicated app data in group context extensions, and so we would need a nicer diff so that we weren't sending giant group context extensions proposals all the time. In particular, that was a major use case for having GCE diff reach into the extensions and make changes within extension fields. I'm trying to stick with that terminology. So given what a driving use case the application data was for group context for GCE diff, you could ask the question of whether we need GCE diff at all at this point. Like maybe we still do, because you should be able to update things besides application data without having to repeat the giant application data field. So maybe there's still a use case for GCE diff. But then the secondary question is, if we do it, should we just do diffs at the level of whole extensions? Like, is there anything outside of the giant app data where we expect it to be big enough to merit fiddling around inside of an extension field, or should we just replace? And then if we do anything here, even app data update, we're going to deconflict with GCE. If we have multiple, if we have yet another way to touch the group context of extensions, we need to figure out how these all make sense together. Probably some rules about mutual exclusiveness, something like that. Rob?
Yeah, so I would give an example as a test case, external senders, which could contain multiple credentials. Credentials could get kind of big, but from my perspective, I could see how somebody might want that, but I personally don't think that it's necessary to have diff semantics on true extensions. But I think that the like external senders is a good sort of test case because it like lets people kind of imagine something that could be kind of big but not huge, and it lets us said, you know, it gives us something concrete to think about.
Yeah, great example. Thanks. Next slide, please, Sean. So another kind of interesting implication here, once you have this, you know, what's this idea in your head of drawing a distinction between things that touch MLS and are extensions and things that don't touch MLS and which are app stuff. If you take that idea and you look back at the extensions document, there's some things in there that don't really look like extensions in this new stricter framing. So like app-ack is talking about what's happened in the MLS sessions. It doesn't actually cause MLS to work any different. So in principle, you might be able to just do that inside of, you know, in one of these application data proposals. Similarly with last resort key package or content advertisement, you know, maybe a content advertisement being things inside the plain text, like maybe that's something to put in the app API as opposed to talking about it as an extension. So like if we decide to kind of go down this path of having a more fulsome app interface, like maybe we want to reevaluate some stuff that's in extensions at the very least in terms of how we talk about them. Next slide, please. Yeah, Raphael.
Yeah, where were we at that? So I mean, I fully agree that it makes sense that stuff that does not touch the protocol as such and really just uses it as applications do should not be called an extension. And I'm wondering, I mean, the MLS extensions document was named that because at the time we all thought that, you know, this is the right name. Going through the list of what it contains, there's very little actually that modifies the protocol as such. So we might just rename the document if that fixes the problem here.
Yeah, it could be. It maybe that the thing to do is to have some folks, you know, basically go through the extensions doc and make a proposal to the working group, like see if there's enough left once we go through this reevaluation. Is there enough left to have an extensions doc, or do we just pivot the whole thing to being about you know, how you make better use of MLS?
Yeah,
I
that
I
could also
took a
be
brief
the,
look.
the outcome. Yeah.
I think there was one. I'm forgetting what it was, but I think there was one in at least one thing in there that I noticed would still fit in the stricter extensions definition.
Self-remove.
So self-remove, I think that was the one. I mean, GC diff, I think would also fit in the definition because it's
and maybe the exporter, the forward secure exporter, but I'm not sure where that falls in your definition of modifying the protocol, because it does not modify the base protocol.
In targeted messages, that's a true extension.
That was my feeling as well. And like this is, you know, semantics, so there's not going to be a super clear boundary, but yeah, it feels like targeted messages is probably. I think you could argue the forward secure exporter either way, because you could export a thing from an MLS group and then use that to seed the forward secure exporter. So. Yeah, okay. I think these are useful discussions to have, but I think it would be good to get agreement first that like this is a good split to have.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Let's talk about like conceptual things first, and then we can decide what we do with documents and how we compartmentalize things, etc. Just wanted to note that here, that we have that flexibility also regarding MLS extensions.
All right, I think I just have two kind of wrap up slides here. So yeah, this is just recapping like the basic question for the group here is like, does it make sense to kind of reframe things in this way, to draw this line between extensions and app stuff, and to make an interface that's focused on app stuff? Yeah, Ron?
Yeah, do we want to like do like stop here and ask for the feeling of the room?
Sure. How do folks feel?
Do you want to use a show of hands tool, or do you want to have just people line up? I mean, there's not enough of you that I think it really matters, and I also think that we don't need anonymity here. So feel free to get in the queue, please. I mean, unless I got that wrong and you want to let me know privately, but I kind of feel.
I mean, why don't we give a second for discussion, and then, like, yeah, sure, maybe we do a show of hands just to get it on the record.
So yeah, me again. So I think this makes a lot of sense, especially anything that is related to applications. That sounds very straightforward to me, that should not be called an extension. It also makes sense that we want to give application developers a framework on how they can deal with stuff. They can already do it today, but then they have to figure it out, and it's probably not going to be it's probably going to be hard and maybe not as good as what we can propose here. So that's one thing. The other thing is, it was great to have this comprehensive presentation now, but it happened at like different altitudes, where we have this like high level stuff now. How do we organize stuff? And then like very deep down some details, how we should do things. So I guess we should like separate that process and then discuss the high level stuff first and get agreement on that. And then we can debate the lower level stuff. Yeah. Sorry.
I would be interested, Raphael, on your thoughts about whether you think we've got pretty much the right set of tools here. Whether regardless of the details of how those tools work, like, do we have kind of the right API surface here?
So I feel I'm very confident about the application level stuff. I mean, for me, this is uncontroversial. It's very clear. But so what remains unclear is what we want to do with what we previously called extensions. And so first of all, we still don't have a super crisp definition of what it means to change the protocol. Like, we seem to disagree a bit on what's what. It seems relatively clear that the MLS extensions document as it is doesn't make much sense. We can either rename it, we can take stuff out of it, etc. But again, before we talk about what document we have, how many of them, etc., we should talk about what we want, like what the intention should really be for all of that. So for editor of that document, I was said that people who added stuff should then also discuss it. So we're missing Conrad today, and I was not involved in the safe extension stuff. And so, yeah, it would be interesting to have his opinion on that. Especially because I want to be sure that if we move stuff out of there, that still everything is covered, that the stuff that we discussed previously. So in other words, the leftovers are not entirely clear to me. And whether because I think we want them, because so far it was still a coherent approach to have the safe extension. There was the wrong name, and the scope was maybe a little too broad, and now we need to compartmentalize it. But it's not entirely clear to me that we want to throw away some of that stuff, unless somebody makes that point. But that was not my impression from this presentation. So yeah, those are my points.
Yeah, to be clear, I was not intending to kind of delete any functionality here. I was just trying to kind of create the right buckets. And I mean, my big care about here is getting the application complexity out of MLS. So all this like diff stuff that was in fact starting to come in via AppSec and GCE diff, like getting that complexity and delegating that out to the application. I think we achieved that here. So I'm pretty happy with this structure. On the distinction between the extension, not extension point, I think another another informative example. Rowan brought up external centers. That's I think a useful example because it's an extension, and it affects how you do message validation. So that's pretty clearly affecting MLS behavior. I think another interesting thing to think about it, bringing in an example from TLS, is something like ALPN, the application and protocol negotiation, which I think in this framework, I would probably categorize as an application thing. It's not something that touches the internals of like how you do a TLS handshake, but it is attaching something that the application cares about to the handshake. So if you're going to do something ALPM like here, how would we categorize that? Just thought it was another useful example. Greta?
So I like the general direction this is going. To the goal of clarifying complexity, I think we have some mostly probably terminology distinction that would be good to still work out. So for example, even just on this slide, we have this doesn't influence how MLS works as one category. But what does that actually mean? And as Rowan pointed out, if you are talking about a proposal that somehow changes this field, that it's technically changing how MLS works, but it's very different than if we have an extension that proposes how the MLS tree is formatted and what you sign and hash and whatnot. So there's rather big distinctions in what an extension would be versus just application. What I'd like to see is maybe more of a breakdown, even when we talk about application functionality versus extension here, where we can say we've got security extensions, we get functionality to extensions, we've got whether it's application functionality or application extensions. So like a clear breakdown of what sorts of things are in what. So if I was looking at an MLS system, I could say, this is clearly going just by what you've selected, it's going to change the key schedule. It's a big change versus you're including different data in this field. And to that point earlier about even the fields themselves, maybe once change the name so it's whether we call it extending or something other than saying extension, because I can easily see how in implementation this could be misinterpreted if everything uses the word extension.
Oh, that gives me another terrible idea, which is that we could, for the app data we're attaching to the group context, we could not put that in an extension field. We could have the extension, the application data extension, add a field to group context, which is application data. But like I said, I think that's probably a bad idea. Rob?
Yeah. So I had two comments. So the first is that, I mean, obviously, like, I'm in favor of this. This is something that, Richard and I had hammered out together. My primary focus, my short-term focus, is on having something that provides functionality like what was in AppSync. So going to the, like if we were to go back and look at some of Richard's earlier slides, specifically the app data update proposal, and then the application data extension group context extension field that is a container for some of that data. The document that I sent, it registers components, and that is what would be necessary to, yes, and Richard is right. Other names would be fine. But that functionality, that is super critical for Mimi, and we can't really go forward in Mimi in terms of either spec work or implementation until we have some way forward. And it's okay if the name changes, but conceptually the model should, we should have something going on with the model. So, I would really urge people to react to whether the two proposal types and the extension field container for application data, whether that feels right. Because all the other stuff is stuff that we already have in safe extensions. And it's just, the only difference is that we have component IDs instead of extension IDs inside of the framing of those messages, right? Inside of the label, and so forth, right? So I haven't heard Rafael or Britta or Marta or anybody else say anything about the two proposals and this container this group context extension field in which you can put component ID application data, and that's what I'd really like to get some feedback on.
Go rescue your cookies, Ron. Just to quickly interject, I think part of the reason I'm enthusiastic about the structure we've got here is that I think it does get us to something usable and more likely to be stable faster because it's designed to align pretty closely with the functionalities. So like the app data extension field has a specific usage. The app data proposal has a specific usage. The app data update, like there's very specific things here. And so we can look at them and be more confident that they're doing the small specific job we want. Yeah, Britta?
To Roland's question about feedback on these particular containers, my main concern is metadata and what that impact could have. It's not clear to me just yet, at least from the discussion here, whether, what that looks like. But that would be the main point of feedback.
Yeah, my feedback on this is that, like I said earlier, we're discussing at different altitudes. Again, the higher level structure should be there first, and then we should look at that. I'm neither like in favor or against it. I need to look at it more closely, and a good point, Britta, about the metadata. I haven't looked into that at all. But I mean, summarizing, I can say that it's great that there is some more stuff happening now, because it felt not very consistent so far. We had this different proposal, like group context extension, and then syncing app data as well. And this should all be just one mechanism. It shouldn't prevent people from developing other super proprietary things if they want to, but we should give them comprehensive and easy to use frameworks for day-to-day stuff using MLS. And I suspect it's going into that direction, but I'm happy to get back to you, Ron, once I've looked at that in more detail.
Thank you.
Any thoughts from other folks? So it sounds like a useful kind of next step here. I'm feeling like we're getting a good vibe on the overall high-level approach here. It seems like a useful next step would probably be for the authors of this draft and the authors of the editors of the extensions draft to kind of get together and flesh out a more comprehensive proposal covering both of those documents. And kind of maybe we can have an interim in January to kind of present that proposal to the working group, make sure we're all on the same page, and then go implement it. Does that sound like a plan, folks?
Yeah, I think that sounds very good. And then we can rediscuss naming, because it's neither AppSec nor extensions at this point. We do need that better naming machine.
Yeah, sounds great. I also like the fact that it's not called extension but application component now, because it was causing like so much confusion. It's not really extending anything. Yeah, so it sounds like a good next step.
And Britta, Marta, are you generally good with this? Do you want to comment at all about whether this proposal organization, the two proposals, whether that organization seems good, and whether we seem to have struck a decent balance there?
You mean two proposals like add and replace? Sorry, I joined in the middle.
App
Yeah,
data
so
and
there's
app data update.
so basically there's one that's just a replacement for a generic
Mhm.
proposal that doesn't it's just carried by MLS, but it doesn't change any of the group context, and it doesn't require an update path. And then there's the app data update proposal. Terrible names, yes,
Okay.
but that provides a change to that the application interprets and then provides the new application state to MLS. And that could be the full state, or it could be a hash or something else, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. Like application state and kind of associated data sort of proposal, I guess. I guess I would have more use cases for the application state, but
In the chat, I posted these app components, the 4 Mimi app components that I submitted a couple days yesterday, I think, or day before yesterday. Yeah. So those are 4 concrete examples of of components that you could use.
okay, I have a look.
We have another hour of meeting scheduled. We can probably we can keep going. People have stamina.
Yeah, we definitely have more time.
I mean, do folks want to dive into this proposal structure question? Rowan, would you like to tee that up?
I mean, it sounds to me like people just haven't had enough time to to read this, but
Yeah.
It's clear to me. But then again, I helped write it, so.
Yeah, I mean, like, so we have like interims are cheap, right? It's like a week's notice. So if people want to have a chance to read this and think about it, and we can come back again in mid January, that's fine. I guess my real hope here as chair is that we've got some decision about what to do. So when we hit the ground in Bangkok, we've made a decision and we're moving out on what to do with the documents.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I would hope we had like a concrete direction and some new drafts by the time we get to the next ITF meeting.
Yeah, and from sorry, go ahead, Britta.
Yeah, to that end, it'd be great to, after the authors of 2 drafts get together and any revisions take place, it'd be awesome to have another interim to discuss this before Bangkok.
So Sean, you want to send a deal around for mid-late Jan?
I can totally do that. This time usually like there's like a good sweet spot because we don't seem to have a lot of people participating from Asia. So if this kind of like 10 to 2 kind of time frame works, I'll try to limit the number of days and time slots. I'm hoping that Conrad couldn't make it primarily because he's on vacation doing something fun. But if it's a time thing, we may try to slide around because I know he's writing a couple of extensions as well.
It certainly doesn't hurt to have more time slots on a doodle. We'll sort it out.
Yeah.
And I'm also just going to say I'm encouraged by the fact that I didn't hear anybody, jumping in and saying, "I think this looks terrible." Like we should have, it should be more like this, or it should be more like that. So that's kind of nice. We didn't get a strong, heck yeah, but we gotta this looks like we're generally going in the right direction, and we need to figure out some details.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely like to hear from people like Brendan and Conrad and others who are writing quote unquote extensions or whatever they're going to get called, so that they can kind of see in their heads how they fit into this structure. And as long as the people that are writing the documents kind of get it, then I think we get an inertia going on with what's been accepted, and then it's like, oh, that's what we did before. Okay, well, we fit, and if we don't, well, then we adapt and overcome. So, all right, I think you had one more slide, but is it like let there eat cake? There we go. Okay. So that's kind of all moot. But yeah, so I guess at this point, is there anybody else that had anything that they wanted to talk about that's related to MLS at least? All right, well, with that said, I guess I want to thank you for your time. I hope everyone has a great holidays. Thanks again, Brendan, for taking notes. I really appreciate it. And we'll get those revised, updated, and posted. And we're looking forward to seeing some concrete proposals. And again, I'll send out a doodle poll.
Thanks, everybody. Happy holidays.
All right.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. You too.